Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session in Edinburgh's Business Festival as organised by Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce. I'm Kevin Havelock, Regional Director for Edinburgh and East of Scotland Corporate and Commercial Banking at the Royal Bank of Scotland, and I'm also a Governing Council member for Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to be chairing today's session. We've got a great panel and you're very welcome today, whether you're joining us live on Zoom, live on YouTube. This is the first time I've ever transmitted live on YouTube, so that was a first for me, or whether you're catching up on replay, you're very welcome. Our panelists today are Martin Link, Chief Strategy Officer at Wood Group, Emma Mcdonald, CEO and co-founder of Tartan Blanket Company, Dr. Miles Weaver, Associate Professor at Edinburgh Napier University, and Richard Lockhead, MSP, Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work, and we will hear from all of them soon. So for the next 90 minutes together, we will explore the question, what does purpose-driven entrepreneurship mean for Scotland's economy? It's a huge question. We will not get through it in 90 minutes, but hopefully we will ask some brilliant questions and we will hear some great insight from our panelists. If you are live on Zoom today, then you have the opportunity to feed in questions for our panel. I will be relying on you to come up with some brilliant questions for them. And also today we're using the hashtag EdinBusinessFest22. So feel free to use that on Twitter, LinkedIn, or your social media platform of choice. So as I said, we've got a great panel today. We're coming at purpose from various different angles. So please engage and take the opportunity to get the most out of today. The format is relatively straightforward. We will hear from each of our panelists in turn who will share their perspective on purpose and what that means for entrepreneurships and business in Scotland. And that will be followed by the Q&A that I just talked about there. If you're on Zoom, you should have a Q&A button somewhere. Please feel free to type your question into there. And I'd really like to capture your questions and thoughts all the way through our panelists speaking. Don't save them up to the end. It'll be great if I could get them on the way through. And I do look forward to your questions. So let's talk a bit about purpose then. I like the Charles Wookey from the Blueprint for Better Business definition of purpose. He says that purpose is an enduring reason for the business to exist, beyond just making a profit. A purpose that benefits society and respects people, with profit as one outcome. A business needs to make a profit, otherwise it cannot survive, but making a profit is not its purpose. So we hear there about how a business makes a positive contribution to the communities and societies that it operates in, one that goes beyond profit to build an economy that is fairer, greener, and more inclusive. And according to the Blueprint for Better Business, purpose-led businesses really have three angles to them. The first one is that it has a purpose that serves society. It envisages a positive impact on the world, which shapes its thinking, drives its decision-making. So there is a clear, simple, and credible story which links the purpose to the strategy and then to the outcomes and impacts of the business, both financial and non-financial. So it is a purpose that serves society. A purpose-led business has a way of thinking about people. It sees business as a set of relationships. You know, it understands that the long-term success of a business depends on the quality and sustainability of those relationships. And those relationships are with its employees, with its shareholders, its customers, suppliers, society. And it has a responsibility to act as a guardian for future generations. And the third one, a purpose-led business creates the conditions where each person is seen as someone and not as something. It respects the dignity and value of people and seeks to have a positive impact on the lives that it touches. So as I said before, I'm head of corporate and commercial banking at the Royal Bank in the East of Scotland, and I have seen momentum that started before the pandemic, but certainly a stronger momentum now in businesses having conversations about purpose. And I see so many different interpretations of purpose, and actually many different staging posts on the journey towards purpose as well. And some of these customers have got purpose nailed. They're a B Corp. This is what they do, and it feeds into everything that they think about. There are other businesses actually who have a purpose already. They sort of know what it is, but they need to refine it. They need to spend a bit more time exploring it and then sharing it with all of their key stakeholders and relationships. There are some businesses who are aware of it, started to think about it, do some work, perhaps think this purpose thing is huge. I'm not really sure where to go with it next, but at least have it on their radar. And then there's a final group of customers who I think, to be perfectly honest, haven't really thought about purpose. They don't know where to start, and I need support through that. And hopefully today's conversation will be a start in terms of helping them to think about that. But the one thing that is clear is that as time goes by, consumer, society, supply chain expectations will continue to increase around purpose, and it will become an increasingly important factor and an enabler of profitability. So it is certainly something that is here to stay. So thinking more specifically about the Royal Bank, we have adopted the blueprint for better business, and it guides how we do business. And our purpose was announced in February 2020, which is we champion potential, helping people, families and businesses to thrive. And that's very distinct to strategy, which is something else, which is the how. And to deliver the bank's purpose, we have 3 areas of focus, which are enterprise, learning and climate. They're the 3 main areas of focus just now. And we have a number of initiatives running in the business that support our purpose. And I simply do not have enough time to talk to you about them all. But there is one that I would just like to pull out. I think it's particularly appropriate for this session. And that's about our Entrepreneurial Accelerator. So that is a tailored business growth program provided for free. So for customers who, or businesses, I should say, because you don't necessarily need to be a customer to join that program, but for businesses who want to grow, they can apply to join. And as part of the program, they get free one-to-one business coaching. There are thought leadership events. They get free access to city centre office space where we have a hub. There is networking, there's peer-to-peer support. And we tend to support businesses who've got 1 or 2 specific aims in mind, and they could be things like raising equity, entering new markets. It could be attracting and developing new talent. It could be about leadership growth for the individuals behind the company. And so far, we've supported 30,000 entrepreneurs, and we continue to look for other businesses to join the program. And the reason that is really important, because actually it demonstrates the Royal Bank's purpose in terms of helping those people, the families that rely on those businesses, and those businesses themselves to thrive by championing the potential. But more than that, we've set aside a number of places on that program for businesses who focus on purpose. So social enterprises, B Corps, charities who want to grow. And we also have a number of spaces in each intake that we set aside for businesses focused on climate. And it's really interesting for us to meet business leaders and entrepreneurs who have joined the program to grow their business with that growth firmly rooted in purpose. And we've had a fantastic response. But as always, we would like to talk to more businesses who would like to join that. So purpose is a huge topic for us and for all of our customers. I'd like now to kick off with our first panelist to just share their thoughts on purpose. And our first panelist today is Dr. Miles Weaver, who is Associate Professor at Edinburgh Napier University in the business school there, specialising in systemic sustainability and supply chain management. So Miles, love to hear from you now. What does purpose in business mean to you?
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this talk, although I am on the big screen. Kevin mentioned that profit is not a purpose. It's about why your business exists, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So I'm an associate professor at Edinburgh Napier University, And what we'll talk about hopefully a bit later on is I'm a founding trustee of Everyone's Edinburgh that has just been launched about creating meaningful cross-sector collaborations across the city. I have two goals in my life, two missions. One is to reduce the average age of trustees, but that's for another talk, and to build these meaningful relationships to attain the sustainable development goals. How can we build relationships in the city which are meaningful in order to attain these sustainable development goals? So when I think about purpose-led business, and I think about why they've become popular over the last 5 or so years, I'm minded that purpose-driven business is what Scotland does very well. We can go back to 1800s and we can learn the story of Robert Owen and New Lanarkshire, the founder of the cooperative movement. We can go a little bit further back to the Fenwick Weavers in the 1761, who were perhaps the first cooperative. We can learn a lot from the employee ownership. There are 150 employee ownership organisations in Scotland. 150 operate in Scotland, 100 are headquarters in Scotland, and perhaps the most famous of those is John Lewis. The social enterprise movement is strong and vibrant. There's over 5,000 contributing over £4 billion to the Scottish economy, and they started in the 70s and 80s. And of course, where there has been massive growth in the last few years is the B Corp movement, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later on today. And of course, Scotland has a vibrant and strong third and charitable sector. If you want to learn about purpose, just go and ask a charity. They can tell you exactly what their purpose is. Just go and ask Syrians. So, what is a purpose-driven business? I would say there are 5 things. I think we can definitely agree on 3. One is that they state their purpose, as the French would call it, their raison d'etre. 2, they would expand the duties of the directors, not just about the finances, but have a purpose beyond profit, not just look after their finances. The 3rd is that they would measure their impact through reporting. And the 2 that I would also add is a commitment to placemaking. And that's what you're seeing here in Edinburgh with the Everyone's Edinburgh initiative. And I'd add a 5th, which is around pace, recognising that we're part of a transition and we're all on a journey to net zero and to the other sustainable development goals. And how we address the pace at the pace that matters to our organisation is going to be very important. So with purpose, we've learned about this a lot today in the conference, finding your why. Why does my business exist? Why does it matter? What gives meaning to what I do in my workplace? Why does it matter? And in terms of expanding the duties beyond the financials, I had a recent conflict. Last week, I went to Bristol and I said to the person booking my travel, I've got a no-fly policy. It's against my own individual values to fly within the UK. And I demanded to go on the train. And the train was £250, where the flight was £60. So there's a difference between value and values. I was taking a values judgment over a value judgment. So there are conflicts within our own mechanisms in our workplace, our systems, our policies and procedures, because the secretary wanted to book me the cheapest flight and to make sure that I wasn't spending too much time on a train. But no, if I look at the values of our organisation, the university, then it's all about net zero and all about making the right choices for not just our own individual benefit or for our financial benefit. However, the students might complain that I've spent too much money on that. So I want to differentiate between value and values. And Mark Carney has done quite a lot of work about that and written a book on that. We often get confused between the word value and values. You can see that in terms of the entrepreneurial spirit of Scotland with our can-do network. And you can see that that talks a lot about creating more value, economic value in Scotland, and the importance of scale. But there's a number of organisations, family businesses, for instance, that don't necessarily want to scale. They want to build value for themselves and to their community, and they might not necessarily scale. So we've been talking about Can Be. Scotland Can Be is an organisation that was set up about 5 years ago. What type of Scotland do we aspire to be? What can we be? We can grow our purpose-driven businesses, our cooperatives, our social enterprises, our charitable sector, and of course, our new business model, our certification, which is the B Corp movement. And I always like to ask the question, in everything that I do, any decision that I make, who may be marginalized by this decision that I've made? So if I made the choice to go on the plane over the train, who might be marginalized over that decision? And I use the word value, the planet, our environment, over economic value. If we move on to impact reporting, we've seen a great trend in this around how we report our sustainability through impact reporting. Many organizations do this now, and they're using the common language of the Sustainable Development Goals, connecting local and global goals, and reporting on the National Performance Framework and more city marks, such as the net zero ambitions of Edinburgh in our city, recognizing that we are part of a journey and transition is key, and how we do this at pace. Now, Edinburgh Napier University, we're just about to launch a free course, a free MOOC, a mass online course, Build for Purpose course, that helps you on the journey using the UN SDG Action Manager. So we're going to be helping organisations in Edinburgh for free. We've got funding for it to help them through an impact journey, through understanding how they address the Sustainable Development Goals across the baseline, looking how they work towards climate action and net zero, and working on the SDGs that matter to them. Which brings me on to my last 2 points around placemaking and the importance of placemaking. Ban Ki-moon said that global sustainability will be won or lost in cities. Now, I prefer to use place because it's where people gather. It's not just about cities. I'm a village boy, really, but place. How do we come together in places? Because we're passionate about where we live and where we work. And how do we work to build these meaningful collaborations? And that's exactly why Everyone's Edinburgh has been set up, to create the collaborations between businesses and to create that meaningful engagement between business, communities, citizens alike. So I invite you to come and join us with Everyone's Edinburgh. It is supposed to be for everyone. Now, in terms of the transition and the pace that we're going at, I'm a little bit disappointed. I'd like it to go a little bit faster, of course. But when I look to my students and I look at the entrepreneur students I have in my class this morning doing our purpose-driven business module, they don't talk about profit, making loads of money. They talk about what they want to bring about, the difference, how they want to bring difference and make a difference. They don't talk about money and making profit. That comes afterwards, doesn't it? After we found what our purpose actually is. So our game changers get it. And I'm looking forward in a few years' time to getting the Gretas and the others who were marching down the Royal Mile and to Arthur's Seat, and they were demanding systems change, not climate change. So hopefully as a university, we're looking at the future of work. Any ideas that you have? What are the future jobs in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? What would those jobs be? What degrees do we need to offer as universities for those jobs of the future? I think that's what we need to do. But I look to our young people and I'm really, really, really excited. I can't wait to see their contribution and how we can bring that to the fore. So thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Miles. That was really helpful. I really loved your example of the trip to Bristol, actually, and how that brought out values versus value. There's a lot of V's in there. And thanks for touching on the USDGs, the UN SDGs, because that's just a huge topic, actually. So lots to get stuck into there. So Miles, thank you for that. Hopefully that's triggered lots of questions for people. I would now like to introduce Martin Link, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Wood Group. Martin joined Wood Group in 2011 and is at the heart of the Wood Group, a famous oil and gas services business as it pivots towards the energy transition. So Martin, keen to hear from you about what purpose means to you in the Wood Group.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you, Miles. I think you'll find that I'm building on a lot of your thoughts, actually, Miles. And yeah, it's great to be part of this panel today. If you don't know Wood, we're a big energy services company headquartered in Aberdeen, where I am today. And we were set up by, if you're talking about Scottish entrepreneurs, there's probably no greater example in recent memory than Sir Ian Wood and what he managed to do with the business as it was pivoting from fishing. He saw the opportunity in oil and gas and he's continued to be an entrepreneur. And even just yesterday, I was reading about the Wood Foundation handing over Rwanda's oldest and largest tea factory to 500 smallholder farmers in Rwanda. As we think about, what business is a force for good, what better example is there than that? And that was just yesterday that I saw. He's still going. So yeah, I've got a few thoughts on purpose and the role of business. Probably 4 key themes as I was thinking about this topic. And the first one, I mean, each of them is going to kind of play on the profit versus purpose theme. And I guess the first one is that profit versus purpose. When I look back historically, I'm sitting in a big multinational. Over the last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a revolution around ESG, environmental, social and governance in the investor community and the financial industry. But we're wrestling really with that kind of trade-off, it feels sometimes, between making a profit and being true to your purpose. And Miles touched on that in his comments. And I think when I look at the history of industry, of business, and I think about purpose and where we are today, there's probably 2 things that jump out. These might be a little bit controversial, I don't know, but as we want to be values-based, we want to be part of values-based leadership companies. And I think if we're looking for a values-based leadership, that's not something that can be taught. I think that comes from who you are. And you can only develop a values-led organization if you yourself are values-led. And we create who we are in business. So I think there's a real interesting dynamic going where businesses are trying to respond to the whole rise of values. And as you said in your introductory comments, Kevin, some of the companies are really wrestling what does that mean for us? Because they've not been, it's not part of their DNA. The other thing I was thinking was, I don't actually think it's the role of business to give you purpose as an individual. I think purpose comes individually as to us as individuals, and we align ourselves with the values and purpose of a company. As the company figures out where it's going and what it wants to do, I don't think we should be looking to companies to give us that. I think we bring that as individuals, and the companies either align with our DNA or not. So yeah, that's the first dynamic of, how do we create businesses that continue to make profit, but also have a deep sense of purpose? And I think those 2 kind of areas are key. The second one, when I look at what we're doing within Wood and trying to be a leader in sustainability and sustainable practice, is profit in purpose. I think, there is an opportunity for many companies around the world to be seen as leaders in this space and see it as a differentiator, particularly when it comes to talent and attracting talent. If you can be perceived and in reality, if you are a sustainably driven company and you're really embedded the SDGs into all your business practice, I think this is highly attractive to younger generations, and they want to be working for companies that are doing these things. So we've been involved in a number of areas, and we're actually sponsoring the SDGs number 7, clean and affordable energy for all, as part of the Business Avengers, which sounds pretty cool. I don't know if we get a uniform with that or not, but that's just one example of the kind of things that we're doing. And I would put that under the bracket of a corporate purpose. And so I think there's something definitely around the profit in purpose. The third area is one that's close to my heart, and I would bring it to the energy transition. I lead the energy transition megatrend for Wood, as you said, we pivot towards a low carbon economy, and we really wrestle with what is our social purpose. And particularly when you think about the license to operate, the social license to operate that has historically operated within the UK and other countries about providing affordable energy. That's effectively been ripped up over the last few years, and we're in the process of re-establishing that, which all the events of recent weeks have made even harder, as we really realize, okay, we need energy security as well as energy affordability and sustainability and reliability. And that I would put that under the bracket of profit and purpose, because I think actually as a services company, we're a bit unusual in that it's not just us trying to be a good company and do the right thing. We believe we can also provide services and solutions in a low carbon economy. We have a hydrogen business, we have a carbon capture business, we can decarbonize oil and gas through methane reduction and flaring reduction. So we like to think that we're part of the solution, and there is a profit to be made in this in the right way by being a purpose-driven company. So we like to think of that as our green handprint, as well as our green footprint, which is our own corporate emissions, our scope 1 and 2 and 3 emissions. And the last one, I think, is around global advocacy. And for me, this is around profit through purpose, in trying to figure out how do we help these heavy carbon dioxide emitting industries transition to a low carbon future. And some of these questions have not been resolved yet. And we don't quite know how to create the purpose for a lot of these industries. And we're really wrestling with this in terms of our voice, our global advocacy, trying to shape the market. And we're trying to navigate this turbulent and bumpy road to net zero, and trying to figure out how can we grow as a business, how can we help society, and how can we really solidify our purpose through as these industries develop and change. And we'll maybe come on to that in the Q&A. But I think those, for me, that's kind of the multi-layered relationship between profit and purpose. And I think ultimately, we want to avoid the trade-offs where it's either profit or purpose, and we have to either compromise our purpose, our beliefs, our goals, or we have to develop a profit. I think we need to figure out the business models and the operating models where we can do both simultaneously. So a few thoughts to get us started, Kevin. I look forward to the discussion.
Brilliant, Martin. Thank you very much. And actually, I'm sure we will come back to the trade-off between profit and purpose. And actually, really interesting to hear your perspective there about how purpose plays into talent acquisition, resource and skills, and wanting people to work for Wood. Great, Martin, thank you very much. And I'd like to introduce Emma Mcdonald, who is CEO and co-founder of the Tartan Blanket Company. She is a champion of sustainability in her business and has created a business that does not minimize people over profit. Emma, we'd be delighted to hear from you and your view of purpose.
Hi, thanks for having me. It's great to be part of this and hear all different perspectives on this. I think as a company, we've always been founded on having a purpose. So we've been going now for about 8 years, and the purpose of the Tartan Blanket Co. is to have a positive impact and inspire moments of warmth. With that, we launched our Positive Impact Pledge about 2.5 years ago now, which means that we donate 1% of all revenue to charity supporting people and 1% to charity supporting the planet. I think this allows us, our positive impact, to scale with us, which means that as we grow, so does our positive impact. Alongside this, we focus on sustainability through every part of the journey of the product, from how it's woven, the materials that are used. So we use recycled textiles, so all the landfill products, we break that down and reweave that into our sustainable wool blankets, and we work with community farms in Mongolia and partnerships in the way that we manufacture out there. So it's really about thinking about every single stage, and then how the goods are packaged, how they're shipped out, every aspect. And we've also applied for B Corp status last year, so that's just pending certification. But yeah, so we were really founded from the very start on how we could be a purpose-driven business. And a lot of that came from my background. So I worked in buying and merchandising for fast fashion for a number of years and saw sort of the underside of how that all happens, and the negative impact on both the planet, the people, how the supply chains operate. And so I think when we launched our business, it was really important, and I realized that my purpose was to create a business that was focused on people, planet, and profit. So I think, again, that trade-off, I think it's really important to differentiate the facts that you don't have to be a not-for-profit company to have a positive impact and be focused on people and planet. And I think the future of companies are ones that focus on all. So we have been profitable every single year. And actually, when we launched our Positive Impact Pledge and donated 2% of all revenue to charities, that was our most profitable year to date. which I think just highlights the fact that it is not a trade-off. It's actually something that drives more customer interest, and more people are willing to spend more money with you. They're more willing to come back and shop with you because they understand that where their money's going and what that means. So that's been really positive for us. We're really transparent with our customers and with our team, which again is such a growing trend in the market, that customers want that transparency. And we're really focused on not just being negative, like not having a negative impact, but actually having a positive impact. And all of our team are really focused on that purpose. And we've really done a lot as well. In the last year, like Martin sort of touched on, about what are our team's purposes. So what are their individual purposes, and what gets them up in the morning, what do they see their future looking like, and making sure that that aligns with our purpose, so that we have those shared values and we have that shared vision of where we're taking the company and what kind of impact that we're going to have. And as a result, we've actually attracted some amazing talent into the business. And even though the market has been tough for a lot of people, we've actually found a huge amount of talent in the last couple of years as we've grown, which has been like incredible. But I think that is that people are looking for that purpose, because especially with all the changes that we've had in the last couple of years, people have been a little bit more driven by that purpose and not being focused, not wanting to work in an industry that might be harming the planet, and also taking the customer on that purpose journey with us. I think that sometimes you have to really focus on your purpose. Like it's been mentioned before, we've had to turn down opportunities, and we've had to not look at cost cutting because it does not align with our purpose. And I think a lot of the time businesses can do initiatives which are sometimes more marketing focused than they are on actually what are they changing about their company's purpose. If their company is overall having a negative impact, then doing small positive impact initiatives is not actually becoming a purpose-driven company. And so I think it is really important about that transparency and staying true to those values. So saying no, even if those opportunities sound great but don't align to your purpose, because that's how brands will really not have the loyalty with their customers and with their teams. So that's been so important to us about how we've continued to grow and how we focused on the direction for our growth. And sometimes it's really hard to get sustainable options in the market. And when we started 8 years ago, it was a real challenge to find sustainable materials and ways of working. It's a lot easier now because it's obviously gained in popularity, but I do think that there's a long way to go in terms of how we make that easier in the market to get access to sustainable materials affordably and offer sustainable products to customers affordably. I think potentially there's an element that the government could play in taxing some materials that are not sustainable, such as polyester, which is very unsustainable in its manufacturing using crude oil, and then in its use because it doesn't biodegrade. If that was taxed, then I think that companies would be able to actually, like we as entrepreneurs and things, would come up with creative ways of finding more sustainable products, and the supply chains would have the pressure to come up with more sustainable options, and then the customer wouldn't be choosing between a cheap non-sustainable product and an expensive sustainable one. And actually we would have a level playing field where sustainability wouldn't be a cost choice, it would just be the options in the market. And so I think there is a long way to go on that, but I definitely think in terms of consumer-led demand, it is towards sustainability and that purpose-driven mindset of businesses, but I think we could get there faster if there was a bit more regulation in place. So thank you. Yeah, lovely.
Emma, brilliant. Thank you very much. That was really interesting, and I just love the fact it was a reaction to fast fashion. And you know, having been to a dinner recently with Miles, we were there talking about the Just Economic Transition Forum that's been set up in Edinburgh. And when you hear some of the detail around about fast fashion, the impact it has on the environment and the use of resources, it is actually quite terrifying. And again, from you, one or two themes being pulled out about how purpose and profit go hand in hand. I loved what you were saying about transparency and a tool for attracting talent as well. So could I ask you then, Emma, if you were looking to set up a business today that had purpose and you were resetting your business so you could take all the lessons you've had from the last 8 years, what is the advice that you would give to yourself?
Yeah, it's been a bit of a learning curve and a learning journey. I think I would definitely say to anyone starting is to think about what their personal purpose is. So take away whatever industry they decide to go in, what is their personal purpose in life? Like what would fulfill them every day, and how are they going to have a positive contribution to the planet or their society or the community or whatever aspect that is that really drives them. Then it would be about like how can they have a really positive purpose in the business, like what would build that, and where's the gap in the market. So I think I feel quite like we've gone on this journey and we've put in these different aspects, but I feel quite confident that I could enter many different markets with the same mindset and the same framework and have a really positive impact and speak to the customer in a really transparent, honest way. But I think there's a lot of areas and gaps in the market that are not being fulfilled by purpose-driven businesses. So thinking about areas there, I think could lead to a lot of opportunities for people.
Thanks, Emma. That's really helpful. There's a question on the feed, Emma, while you are on the mic. Have you found any obstacles or had any difficult choices to make in order to stick to your purpose and values? And you did talk about turning away opportunities, so really keen to hear more about those difficult choices.
Yeah, definitely in the last few years, we've expanded quite a lot in terms of both direct retail and our wholesale. So when we partner up with wholesale partners, we like to think that they align with our purpose, and that they're able to, and their purpose reflects that and the direction that they're going in. So there has been opportunities for us to work with partners, quite large partners, but we didn't feel that their purpose was strong enough. And like I've talked about, there's a lot of what people are calling greenwashing at the moment, which is marketing messages around that. So potentially utilizing brands like ourselves that are focused on purpose to help elevate their messaging, but not necessarily changing the core values and purpose of the business. So that has been very important to us. Other aspects has been things like how we try and ship goods and try and make, like, logistics has been a nightmare recently, and so we've had to make some really challenging choices, and that can often be quite difficult, and we've had stock be really delayed. But again, we try and think about the sustainability aspects within that, and also our manufacturing and things like that. As we've grown, we've had to really focus on finding new sustainable partners, and we do a lot of research to try and do that. So again, we've had to pull back sometimes in pushing manufacturing to make sure it is with the right partners. So yeah, lots of different challenges along the way. But staying true to your purpose, I feel like, will mean that you will not get any like sleepless nights. And actually it makes decision making a lot easier, because you know in the long run you're coming out with a much better end result rather than getting a quick win, because it's quick wins that will destroy your brands and will take you down the road that you do not want to go down. But often that can feel like the easier option. So yeah, it can be challenging, but worth it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, having that North Star that you follow and guide all of those decision-making points. And actually that reminds me of one of the things that is really important in the Royal Bank round about purpose, is that we have something called the Yes Check, which are 5 questions that actually you need to be able to answer yes to all of these questions whenever you make a decision, and it helps you think about how would other people see it, how does it align, where are the conflicts. So actually just having those tools to have the discussion, the debate and the thought process, Emma, that you talked about there is useful. And just to stop and think, it's very easy to make the quick decision. Thank you for that, Emma. I think we've got a question now for you, Martin, and we've talked quite a lot about how purpose and profit go hand in hand, and you talked about ESG and shareholders. Can you just elaborate for us? Do these big shareholders really believe that it's acceptable to accept a lower return, at least in the short term, while you pivot your business and deliver your strategy?
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think I would have to say no, the short answer. I think there's I guess we're talking about a premium, an ESG premium on your business in terms of value. My sense of the market and our peers, competitors, the general industry, is that if you're delivering solid business performance and you're sustainable, then you get extra reward. If you're making a lot of sustainable purpose noises, but you're not delivering a solid business performance, you get hammered like everybody else. And in the FT last year, there was the stories around the Danone CEO being replaced, who'd been a sustainability champion in that area. But the core business, it was perceived, wasn't keeping up with competitors. And so all of his track record and positioning in that space really didn't save him. So I think we're in an interesting phase right now where eventually it will be rewarded. I think part of the challenge is investors are not exactly sure which of the 1,000 or so, a couple of thousand metrics that these ESG companies are measuring are the critical ones. So who is greenwashing? Who is really doing it? And we've seen the EU sustainable taxonomy, which is something that is going to hopefully help clarify what is sustainable and what isn't. So it's still fairly immature, I would say, just now, from my perspective, Kevin, that maybe in 3 or 4 years' time, we'll see kind of out of this fog, certain leaders emerge and it'll be clear why they're leading. But I do think it's easier when you're a startup to kind of start with a fresh piece of paper, a clean slate, have a really clear purpose, and then get after it, where you see the market gap, as Emma was saying. That's much, much better and cleaner than a company with a lot of heritage issues, I'll just call it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that makes absolute sense. And actually, Martin, there is a question in the feed, or a comment really round about how you move on Wood Group with quite a heavy fossil fuel reputation and past. Yeah. So perhaps you could just expand on that for us.
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and one that I kind of expected, really, because I think this is something I personally wrestle with. How do you move to the future you want? And Miles mentioned at the beginning about pace. So if I go back to COP in November, I was in Glasgow for 2 weeks, and there was a real sense of progress back in November and December. Some really good words came out, some pledges, and then we hit the last few weeks and all the challenges. And in an ideal world, we would flip a switch and we would shift our 80% of the energy industry that's based on fossil fuels to zero, and all of that would be replaced by alternative industry, clean fuel in a matter of weeks. But unfortunately, we're so dependent on fossil fuels in every aspect of life. I mean, Emma was talking about the petrochemicals that form polyester, I think it was, or some of the fibers that are used in textiles. It's so interwoven with our society that we cannot unhook ourselves from it. And we've seen, not at the pace that I'm comfortable with, and I'm sure many of us are comfortable with. So we have this dependency issue right now. And so the question is, how quickly can we reduce that dependency issue? And I find myself challenging people. People say, we've got 20 to 25, 30 years of oil and gas, left. All the scenarios have a big component of oil and gas in 2050. I turn that around and say, well, how can we make that 10 to 15 years, right? It's maybe not months, but could we make it a decade? Could we make it 15 years? What would it take to do that? And I'll just finish with one example. I mean, I'm actually the same as Miles. I have a no-fly policy in the UK as well, actually. I get the train to London. I get the train down to Edinburgh, wherever I'm going. It's 22 times better to take the train per mile per person and fly. So we know it's the right thing to do. However, those trains are still driven by diesel, right? So they're still using fossil fuels to get to London. So we're in this catch-22 where the whole system needs to change, and we can't flip a switch and do that. So my philosophy would be, who can help us? Well, the ones who can help us are companies like Wood, like the BPs, the Shells of the world, who are heavily knowledgeable of the area. Let's be patient, because it's going to take time with them as they seek to do the right things. But it's, I do think this is a tension definitely between profit and purpose that we're trying to work out as an industry.
Martin, thank you for that. Question for you then, Miles. So thinking practically, and I'm thinking about your supply chain, your systemic change, what sorts of things would be at the top of your list for an SME that wants to become more purpose-driven? What does it practically look like? What's different?
That's a good question, looking at it from an SME perspective. So we're using tools such as UN SDG Action Manager and the BIA tool. So Emma mentioned that they have the aspiration of being a B Corp. You can use those tools as the blueprint. But again, it's a transition. We have to think about pace. I want all these things to be done tomorrow, but we have to go at the pace that works for society, for the government, for other businesses, for everybody. But you can use something like the UN SDG Action Manager to see the type of business I want to create in 3 and 5 years' time. And so we talked a little bit about some of these, what you call black swans. So we mentioned investments and pensions and things like that. If you want to be more sustainable, the big areas, the black swan of the future, even if Ukraine and COVID and Brexit is not enough for you, will be when we change our pensions and move them away from oil and gas and tobacco, like the Lothian. The minister's not here at the moment, but the Lothian pension fund is still wedded into that old economic model. But the future has to be around hydrogen and all these other wonderful things, and also around a commitment to place. So the big revolutionary thing to think about is the governing document. This sounds really, really boring now. If I was an SME and I was setting up my business, the 5 things I mentioned: purpose, the duties of my director to go beyond the financials, how I'm going to report on my impact, a commitment to place, and how I'm going to address the transition and make sense of that pace. I would write that into my governing documents. So if you are a for-profit business, then your purpose in that document is to make profit, is economic growth. It's just there. But if you're a charity, your purpose is more of a wider impact. Now, Companies House has started to do some work asking companies to register their governing documents to go beyond that traditional purpose statement of economic wealth type stuff, the stuff that we teach in the business school, to the wider impact you're going to make. So it starts with the governing document, the business that I want to create. And so I'd ask everybody to open up your governing document, whether you're an SME or you're the Wood Group, and look at that document and see what it says. So 2 examples there. We've got P&O on the news tonight and yesterday. If they had a commitment to place in their governing document, they wouldn't have done what they've done, would they? And if we look at, I haven't watched it yet, but last night there was a Dispatches or Panorama program on Cadbury's. Now, I spent 20 years in Birmingham, and I would always argue that Cadbury's is a great example of sustainability, but not when Kraft bought it, and not when Mendoza took over. And if their governing documents talked about their purpose in the eyes of their founder, the Cadbury family, it would take 75% of the shareholders to vote in and change that governing document. So you wouldn't have the P&O situation, you wouldn't have Cadbury's. So my challenge to the minister when he arrives is in Scotland, we can do things differently. Let's change 1,000 governing documents, or encourage businesses to encourage their governing documents. So we lock in purpose and impact reporting and all these other things that we've been talking about. So these things don't happen again.
Thank you, Miles. I think what you brought out there is we talked earlier about financial and non-financial implications of purpose, and actually when you look at those examples that you used there, some of those businesses, and we all think about Ratner's from when I was a lot younger, and how some of those companies, if ever, take a long, long time to recover if they lose sight of purpose in there. I suppose the other question that I've got, I want to just check the feed at this point in time. I suppose the other question I've got, which I think I would like an input from all of our panelists today on, is really about becoming more purpose-driven. It's a brilliant question. You open yourself up to criticism for any previous mistakes or things that you haven't done perfectly at a point of time in the past. And Miles, interested in your view as to how do businesses manage that conflict, and how do you portray that externally?
So a number of ways that we've already spoken about, but how you report on your impact is really, really important. So if you look at Aberdeen Standards report, it's a fantastic example of a good report. Royal Bank of Scotland's another good example too. If you look at Aberdeen Standard, they really go, you open it up and it talks about their commitment to the locality, the cities and the nation, as well as global goals such as sustainable development goals. And they report on that. They have a strong commitment there to the SDGs and also our local goals. And reporting is important. It's not about the genuine purpose of why we exist, but reporting is important because I'm reminded when I was my first ever trustee of a students' union, and a particular financial organisation offered to buy us a minibus, and another financial organisation found out about it and they bought us free. So that's the importance of company reporting our impact. You read it and you want to better it. So it does create a competitive standard that we want to beat. And I remember that from the minibus about 20 years ago. I won't mention who those organisations were. But you see that in the company reports. And as Emma mentioned earlier, she's seeking to be a B Corp. So in B Corps, there are 200 points available and you've got to get over 80. And that provides a certification of how sustainable your business is. And if you wish, you can make the results transparent and put it on the website. Now, you can see some organisation, I won't mention what the organisation is, but got 85 5 years ago and got 81.5 last year. So they slipped, but at least we can see that. That's transparent and we can work to improve that. And you can see the Patagonias of this world who score over 150. But 150 is still 50 short of 200. So there's still room to go. So impact reporting is very, very important. Measuring impact and building that into the work that you do through using the DIA tool and UNSDG Impact Manager is really, really important. But I think I'll end there. But the other important thing is about how you build those partnerships within a city, that placemaking. It's so important. And that's all about good conversations and facilitating good conversations. And that's why we built Everyone's Edinburgh, for everyone to join and have those conversations and find where we can work together, where those shared values are that we can work on.
Thank you for that, Miles. Martin, from your perspective, I think that's a really important question from Wood Group's perspective, given the fishing transition into oil and gas and now pivoting towards clean energy. How do you manage things and the perception of what an organisation has done in the past?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question because, one of the things that I've seen as we've kind of been, I would say the ambition loop for climate has kind of ratcheted up a lot over the last 3 years, and particularly in industry, in industrials, diversified industrials and energy and infrastructure. These are the industries that are way behind some of the other tech industries or some of the SMEs who can move much quicker. And so I've kind of seen a bit of a change in leadership style, I would say, to be honest, Kevin, and just to kind of build on what Miles was saying. I guess, if you're a B Corp, you've already made that commitment, you're on that journey. I see a lot more the people who are kind of on the edge, waiting to jump in the swimming pool, as it were. And they're kind of, thinking, do we jump? Do we not? What do we say? What commitments do we make? Can we achieve net zero? Can we not? Is it 2030? Is it 2050? Is it scopes 1 and 2? And so there's all this uncertainty about what's even possible. And many companies don't actually know how they're going to get there. So these pledges are made, some of it's, they can see the next few years, they know how they can get down maybe 40%, 50%, but they don't actually know how they're going to get to net zero because the technologies are maybe not available yet. But there's a commitment to do the right thing. There's a commitment to be on that journey. And I've been impressed with some of the leadership conversations I've heard where people have said, look, we actually don't know how we're going to get there, but we know it's the right thing to do. And I was like, wow, that's brave, because you're making yourself vulnerable as a CEO when you say that to exactly, as the person asked, not achieving your ambitious targets, slipping up, as you kind of figure your way out. This is not what we expect of CEOs normally. They need to have all the answers. They need to have all the ideas, everything figured out. So I do think there's a different tone, and I'm not sure how patient society is with people who are able or who are trying to communicate that vulnerability. I'll leave that hanging rather than answer that.
Thank you, Martin. Emma, what's your perspective then on transitioning away from a past that was imperfect?
I think in general, whether you're starting a business or you're in an existing business, I think like Miles mentioned about, the B Corp state like point system, like trying to aim for perfection before you start a business or to go straight to perfection is unrealistic. So it is about like what is core to your purpose and how can you achieve those things and then build on the other aspects as you get further down the line. Certainly when we were smaller, we didn't have as much control over our supply chain or different aspects because we didn't have that investment to make those stipulations or have that relationship. So that's grown over time, but our commitment and our purpose behind that and who we started off with, we knew could go on the journey with us. So you do have to have those foundations in place. And I think it is a hard one to adapt from. And I think obviously there is people out there who will call upon the background story and highlight that. And I think it's really just how you handle it. If you're transparent and you're honest and you hold your hands up and say, yes, we did this, it was wrong at the time, but we are working on a future of doing X, Y, and Z. And again, like Miles mentioned, like this is the report to show us that we are on that path. I think it is like actions speak a lot louder than words, and I think there's a lot of people promising a lot of stuff, and it's actually how much you deliver on that. And I even think that we as a society could deliver it a lot quicker if we were committed. But again, we are, as Martin's mentioned, we are tied into a society of functioning where we use fossil fuels and we are not sustainable in the way that we operate. I think technology will massively increase the ability to be more sustainable if we harness it in the right way. And so how that helps us, I think, will be really interesting to see. But I also think that potentially we do need to take stricter bigger steps towards that, which might be a little bit more painful, but it is a bit nerving to see where the planet is going to edge towards if we don't do it a bit quicker. But I think that's a bigger conversation about how we take those steps within society, because people themselves are not going to choose to do that always, because they've got their daily lives and it's quite hard for them to see the bigger picture, and especially those options aren't always on the table. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens.
Absolutely. And actually, Emma, I suppose another question for you, just in terms of the practicalities of a purpose-led business. We talked about skills and resources and how to attract and retain good quality people. What do you do differently then to reward your staff? And I think of that in the context of increasing cost of living that lots of families and households are encountering at the moment, and that's a trend that will continue. What is it you do differently for your team to reward them?
So to start with, we're like a living wage employer, and we also try and pay all of our staff a fair amount. We then also do a 10% profit share. So the whole team, 10% of the company's profit is divided amongst the whole team in a flat structure. Again, it's about everyone is bought into that purpose and whatever role that they play within the business. So that's really important to us. But then it's also like the smaller things. So we do a share warmth award. So every Friday, someone talks about how someone else in the team has shared warmth in a way where they've helped the team, whether they've done something above and beyond, whether they've been we've also done charity where people have been volunteering for charities, so things like that, and then we give them a little voucher, and it's different people, so someone's randomly assigned to nominate within the team, which again is really important because it's not about us recognizing them, it's about recognizing each other and building that trust amongst the team. And then we send out gift boxes for anniversaries, or it's just these little things that I think actually communicate that we care to the team, and that what we do aligns with our purpose. So we wouldn't be, gifting like a flight somewhere because it doesn't align with our purpose. So it's how we stay true to that and how we build that shared purpose within the team that I think is really important.
Emma, that's helpful, and actually it's great to hear about all the other things that you bring out that actually people do value when they're at their at work and in the business, that they spend a huge amount of time in. So that's really good to hear. A question for you then, Martin, about back to this investor question and ESG. How do you convince investors that you're on the right track without greenwashing some of the stuff that you would have done anyway?
Yeah, well, I think the key thing here is we're trying to evolve the portfolio. So, the investors are looking for, good businesses that are, going to thrive in the future as we transition to a low carbon economy. So they're looking for businesses that have the right technology, people, skills. So I think, the best way to answer that is really to look at our kind of low carbon business. So we've done, I think, something like over 145 carbon capture studies over the last 30 years. So we've got a very strong team in Reading, just outside London, who've been working on this for a very long time, a lot of knowledge. And we see that as a real differentiator in terms of what we can bring to our customers who are trying to decarbonize. We've got a big kind of wind exposure as well. We've done about over 600 and odd projects to support onshore and offshore wind. And then with solar as well, I think it's something around 35 gigawatts of solar capacity that we've supported. So, these are areas that are really, becoming, they're becoming more material now with the amount of renewables that's coming onto the grid. So I think what investors want to see is that over the next, 5 to 10 years, your kind of portfolio is going to shift from 80% X to, and 20% Y to maybe, 50-50, and then, 80%, 20% the other way around. And how do you kind of transition through your business, remembering that we're 6 billion in revenue, $6 billion. So that's not, that's hundreds and thousands of contracts. So that's not a quick journey. But I think they want to see that trajectory. And I think they want to see that you're able to grow a business in these emerging industries that's sustainable, profitable, and reliable.
Thank you, Martin. Miles, what's your view on greenwashing? Do you ever see that go on? What do you think of it?
Greenwashing. I think that's the one that most of our students do their dissertations on, isn't it? Yeah, of course there's lots of greenwashing, but it's all about authenticity, isn't it? And what I'm enjoying about this conversation is Martin and Emma, and yourself, Kevin, talking about how genuine you are in the businesses you want to work in. It gives you meaning in the work that you do, and that's really, really important. And as I think Martin said, that the number one reason why you want to do sustainability in the first place is because of the talent that you get and you can keep. It's really important. It's what the students are saying here, that they want to go and work for a company that does good. I don't know if they want to work for P&O at the moment, but they most certainly want to work for the organisations around this table. So I have a lot of hope in that.
So just picking up a question in the feed then, Miles. So are there a cadre of business studies students at the university who are not bought into being purpose-led and actually are reminiscent of a generation or two ago? And if there are, how do you convince them that purpose is the track to go down?
Well, I'd like to reframe that question if I can, Kevin, and say that business schools are the opportunity because we're part of the problem at the moment. So in Napier, we've just set up a module in the postgraduate. It's been running for 3 years called Building Purpose-Driven Business. So we were on the mark and we introduced all the stuff I've talked about, BIA tools and UN SDG Action Manager, and the MOOC that we've created too that we're making available to the public. And we've had a sustainability module all the 10 years that I've been here, which has been a compulsory module across for everybody. Now, the students complain often and say, why do I do that in the final year and not do it throughout my studies? And we're trying to embed that. We're working so hard to embed it in. But as we talk about the traditional economic models that we've been talking about and the future that we want to have, and that we have to move to that transition, so does education. I mentioned earlier that we have to create, what are the jobs of the future and what degrees do we need to offer? We need to offer them now and skill up now. But you will be a business school student, and Kevin, I know you've done an MBA and you'd have learned about Michael Porter's views on capitalism.
Absolutely.
About value chain analysis, and at the core of value chain analysis is economic wealth creation that we mentioned earlier. Well, we're saying something a little bit different here, aren't we? So you can go for a traditional business degree, year 1, year 2, year 3, because in Scotland we have 4 years. And then in our 4th year, we talk a lot about purpose and make it, really give it real meaning. But our traditional models of teaching, our theoretical concepts, even in HR and in marketing, are all still wedded to the traditional economic model, the neoliberal capitalism model. That's the problem. So we need to change that. There's a few in AP who are trying to change that in terms of embedding sustainability across our programs. So my ambition actually in life is to make myself redundant, because sustainability is just in every single module. You don't need Miles to pop up at the end of the lecture and say, oh, let's have 10 minutes on sustainability. It's got to be embedded. So just like education, it's the same as how we're transitioning from that traditional thinking to that new thinking. I know, Kevin, you might tell me off because we mentioned this at the dinner about pensions that we had a couple of weeks ago. Pensions is a big black swan that's going to happen in the next couple of years. And as a question has been directed at Martin, would you invest in oil and gas at the moment? Would you invest in tobacco businesses now? So the traditional economic argument is we need to make sure your pension's as big as possible for when you retire. But in 10, 15 years' time, what businesses will there be? If you look at renewable energy, particularly in Scotland, you look at the work SSE are doing and others, and invest in them now, commit to those now. That's where the future growth will be, not necessarily in the old thinking. So we need a mindset change, a massive mindset change. So there are some things that we can do, like attracting the right people, moving to a renewable energy supplier. It's now cheaper. It most certainly is cheaper at the moment. How you invest, where your pensions are, where you choose to have your pensions. And of course, if I had longer, I would keep going on about change your governing documents. Can we change lots of governing documents in Scotland? Because that will bring about a revolution. But I suppose academics don't talk about revolutions, do they? But that will give you a systems change, not climate change.
Cool. Right. I've written that down twice now, change your governing documents. It must be really important. Martin, question for you, building on what we just talked with Miles. So you talked in Wood about values-based leadership and how that can't be taught, and that you need individuals to be value-led, and how that plays into talent acquisition. Have you changed the way that you recruit people and assess people as they come into the organisation?
Yeah, I mean, we've really put a huge focus in the last 2 years on diversity of thought, Kevin. I think that's one of the things that, if there's been, there's not been many good things to come out of the last 2 years of restrictions and lockdown and COVID, but with the real focus that's through things like Black Lives Matter and a lot of the other things that we're much more connected these days. And when we were up, the sun's just coming out to shine on me as I answer this. I think what the world has woken up to, the kind of the interconnectedness between kind of social inequality, health, and climate change. I attended virtually the UN Global Compact Leaders Summit last summer, and health, climate change, and inequality were the 3 pillars that they said are the biggest things affecting the world, and I totally agree. And I think as businesses, we've realised actually we have a role to play in fixing some of this, and also we're part of the problem and part of the solution, and we can be a big business as a force for good. We can be really helping to change the dial. So yeah, without going into a lot of detail, I would highlight just one thing that we've done. We've created a REN network, Wood Race Ethnicity Network, and we actually got awards, I think it was last week or the week before, for the work that we've done in our internal kind of intercompany network. And a lot of this, as you know, goes on LinkedIn and people see that. So I think this is both helping with the talent attraction, but also in assessment. And we've got functional targets within the function that I'm in, to try and make sure that we've got as broad a pipeline as possible when we're interviewing people. And it's always the best person for the job, but you want to make sure you're not you're not missing any potential diverse candidates. So yeah, I've seen massive change, Kevin, over the last 3 years, very, very positive direction, and hopefully there's more to come.
Indeed, and it will gather it will maintain its momentum and grow from there, wouldn't it? Good. Listen, thank you for the questions that you've given me there. I'm delighted now to welcome Richard Lockhead, MSP, who was detained in the chamber. So we've had to be a wee bit dynamic with the agenda, move things around. But Richard, you're very welcome. And in a moment, I'll pass over you to share your thoughts on purpose and the impact on business in Scotland. But we are delighted to have you here today as Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work, that you were appointed to that position in May 2021. We've had a really wide-ranging discussion, Minister, to be honest. We've covered lots of topics. What we would really love to hear from you is the view from government. What does purpose mean for business in Scotland, and how we pull some of those threads together? So delighted that you joined us. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Kevin. I'm just checking everything's in order here. Yeah, apologies for being held up in the chamber. Parliamentary business overran, and then I was stuck in the chamber and I couldn't get up to join you all. So just unfortunately happens when these events take place during parliamentary days, but I'm glad to have a few minutes with you. I was given a big long speech to deliver. I don't think I'll do that because it's now nearly 4:45 and that's probably the last thing you want to hear. But clearly I'm here as the Minister for Just Transition, Employment and Fair Work. And this morning we had the meeting of the National Economic Forum, of course, in Edinburgh as well. And a big feature of that was the emphasis in our economic strategy, for, the strategy for economic transformation in Scotland over the next 10 years, on fair work and on creating a well-being economy. And it's quite clear that the agenda in the business community, the political agenda, is changing rapidly over recent years. And here we are coming out of the pandemic and facing the climate crisis and wondering about how we can tackle the inequalities in society as we get onto the brink of this economic transformation over the next 10 years, and how we can all play a role in addressing some of these issues. So I think all these issues coinciding have meant that the business purpose is more relevant than ever before, and that's why it's great to see so many businesses and employers getting behind it. I had the pleasure a little while ago of launching the Business Purpose Commission for Scotland. I did that back in November. So that's obviously the joint initiative between the Scottish Government and the Scottish Council for Development Industry, the SCDI. So it's all about considering creative ways in which the purposeful business agenda can be nurtured here in Scotland and what we can do differently. And that's very closely linked to my own responsibility for the Fair Work agenda. By adopting fair work criteria in our workplaces, we can retain staff, we can have more loyalty from staff, we can have staff who get a much bigger contribution to our businesses in helping profits, and it's therefore mutually beneficial for both businesses and employees to adopt the fair work agenda. But in a time of the climate crisis, the business purpose, of course, is all about how businesses can play their role in improving the quality of life here in Scotland, but also the quality of the environment, and making our contribution as a business community and as a country to tackling climate change and just making the world a better place. So hence, businesses with a purpose. So it's very exciting to think about all the changes we could go through over the next few years. And, this new commission is tasked with making recommendations for how Scotland can become known at home and globally for nurturing purposeful businesses, which do make a big positive impact on economic prosperity, social well-being, and environmental sustainability at the same time. So the project clearly aims to address poor corporate governance where that exists by working with businesses and academia to promote and encourage new business models and better corporate governance here in Scotland as well. And the other thing I would just say is that the Fraser of Allender Institute, of course, I don't know if you've talked about this so far, they have highlighted some findings on the whole issue of business purpose. And they found that more than half of the businesses surveyed think that finding profitable solutions to the problems of people and the planet best reflects the role that businesses can play in society. and that compared to only 1 in 4 businesses who think that the purpose of business is simply to maximise returns for shareholders or owners. And most businesses in all sectors of the economy said that the role of businesses is to find profitable solutions to the problems of people and the planet, and not to profit from creating problems for either. And finally, more than half of businesses of all sizes supported purposeful businesses, although the percentage of small businesses was lower at 52% compared to larger businesses at 59%. So there'll be a full report from that commission in due course, and I'm sure that will help spur more debate in the business community and throughout Scotland about business with a purpose. I don't want to say too much more because time's running out. So if anyone's any questions or comments, I think it's really important. But just to say that this is all very much part of creating a wellbeing economy in Scotland, and I think that will help us tackle inequalities. It'll help our business communities in so many different ways as well. And as I said before, it's very much of the setting a trend, hopefully for the rest of the world, the way in which our business communities here in Scotland can help improve environmental sustainability and tackle the climate crisis at the same time.
Good, thank you, Minister. That's really helpful. And just a reminder to everyone, I popped it in the chat there, we have got time because the Minister kept his comments brief there for any questions. So if you could find the Q&A button on Zoom and pop your question to there, that would be much appreciated. And the first question for you, Minister, is looking forward, what change is the Business Purpose Commission looking to create in Scotland, and how will this impact our economy?
I think, well, really it's up to the business, it's up to the Commission and what the recommendations they make in due course of what they think is the best way forward. I think, to answer the question, that raising awareness and encouraging every business in Scotland to think about its own purpose is clearly a big, good outcome that could come out of them having a commission and its report in due course to raise awareness of the issues we're speaking about just now, and the commission wants to see addressed. So I think that awareness raising and trying to encourage every business in Scotland to think about its purpose and its governance and what role it can play in helping Scotland as a country, and indeed the UK and Europe and the world, achieve the outcomes we all want to see for society and for the world. So every business can play some kind of role in that debate. So I hope that's what comes out of the Commission's work.
And no doubt, Miles, you would ask them to change governing documents. We got that message loud and clear. Next question for you, Minister, is so what do you see as the next big opportunity for purpose-driven, and what does the future hold for Scotland's economy?
Well, I think this issue is very closely related to our journey towards net zero. And clearly, as I mentioned earlier, the 10-year strategy for economic transformation, which was discussed at the National Economic Forum today, that met for the first time, has that at its heart. There are massive, massive business commercial opportunities from our journey to net zero if we get this right. But at the same time, we can also fix some of the problems of the past and tackle inequalities. So that's obviously very closely related to my role as the Minister for Just Transition. So as we go through the economic transformation, it's a window of opportunity to fix some things in society, tackle inequalities, that through the Fair Work agenda, through making a contribution towards tackling climate change. So that's a big business opportunity, but also it's a role for businesses to play, to look at their purpose and to play a role in Scotland's global leadership for tackling climate change. So, it's mutually beneficial, and also by grasping those economic and commercial opportunities, business at the same time can make a contribution to getting to net zero. So that's all wrapped up in the business purpose.
Oh, you're entirely right. And actually, when we met a few weeks ago now, we talked about how we can reframe the debate so that climate change and a just transition can be seen as an opportunity for business and not a threat. And I think we've probably all still got a wee bit of work to do just in terms of exploring those issues. One of the next questions on the feed, Minister, is how can SMEs engage with government on these issues?
Well, it's a good question, and we've got to work closely with all our partners, all the public agencies, Scottish Enterprise, in the case of Edinburgh and others, to take forward this agenda. I mean, obviously, once we get the recommendations from the Commission, that will hopefully give us some pointers about how SMEs and others can engage more in this agenda. So that's one of the purposes of having a Commission in the first place. But I think SMEs, it's all about awareness again. I know that people are busy in their businesses and running their businesses, but your point about some of the big agendas out there being opportunities and not threats is really important. So we have to work with our SMEs, also let them know about the opportunities out there and the fact that it's beneficial for the SMEs to get engaged with this debate and look at the commercial and economic opportunities, as well as looking at what their contribution is to the challenges facing our country. So I think we have to make sure we're all singing from the same song sheet in terms of our enterprise agencies, governments, trade associations, business associations, and get the message across to SMEs have got a big role to play.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I think there's a big task in front of us. Thank you for that, Minister. So I think there is a fantastic question in for us to finish for all of our panelists. So I will come round each one of you one at a time. So the question is, do you have a gold star business or an inspirational business that you look up to for purpose? Are there leaders or case studies or examples that you would recommend that we read? Miles, I'd like to come to you first on that one.
Well, the answer to that is Patagonia. If you wear their clothes, they score 152 in the B Corp BIA assessment. So only 48 short of the 200, but they are our leading B Corp. So B Corp is not one of the only models. I talked earlier about social enterprise, employee ownership, different business models there might be. But Patagonia is the one that our students get really excited about. But I was thinking, I want to say thank you to the Minister, because I'm going to use the Scottish Government as an example, because it's Scotland and Canada that's been leading the way on this. And if you read, and I have, the documents from the government, such as the economic strategy, it talks about a well-being economy. It talks about a just and fair transition. If we look at Edinburgh Council and you read their documentation on net zero, it talks about the same things. But the majority of resources are in business. 75% of the resources are within business, and most of them are in big businesses. So it's now for businesses now to change maybe those government documents, but most certainly to commit to the things that we talked about a little bit earlier on. And that's why I hope will come from the Business Purpose Commission.
Thank you for that, Miles. Emma, who's your gold star inspirational business or leader?
I think Miles took that away from me, but yeah, I'm a massive Patagonia fan, and Beyond Chouinard, like his book and the talks that he's given are really inspirational about finding your purpose. So if you're looking to go down that route, that can be really great. And Simon Sinek obviously does a lot about finding your why, but he's not got a business. But all the B Corp lists out there are all very inspirational about how they've started and grown. So yeah, there's a lot of inspiration out there. So just about finding them.
Find them and bring them to our local places. Martin, who's your gold star going to?
This is a really nice question. I immediately was reminded of my 2 weeks in Glasgow during COP. I got to hear Al Gore speak and John Kerry speak of the same week in the flesh, which was an unbelievable experience. But actually, I'm going to give it to an engineer, a lady called Jo Da Silva, who is, she was actually on Desert Island Discs recently. She works for a competitor, Arup, but I've got to know Jo through a series of interviews I've been doing as part of a climate leadership program. 7 climate leaders being interviewed and speaking to each other. I got to know Jo through that, and hearing her story of how she started as an engineer and then got involved in disaster relief overseas, saw the impact of her engineering skills on the ground in basically refugee camps, and how she's used that to her design and engineering to make refugee camps more efficient, which leads to less pollution. And I think, I would encourage people to find that Des Island Disc podcast, listen to it, And I hope that when I'm at her stage in her career, I can tell a similar story.
Good. Sounds very inspirational. I will dig out that on BBC Sounds. And Minister, who does your gold star go to for businesses that follow purpose?
Well, I'm tempted to say Edinburgh Napier because obviously Miles was so complimentary with the Scottish Government. I feel obliged to repay the favour. But then you're looking at the biography of Emma's business as well, and Wood, I'm sure there's lots of other candidates out there. Well, I'm very lucky as Minister. I visit businesses all the time, and I'm blown away by what's happening out there in Scotland at the moment. So I've got a business in my own constituency that's developing technology to make fish boxes out of mushrooms. And, that's a fascinating business to see what they're up to. And I visited ASC Clothing near Eurocentral a couple of weeks ago, who employ a couple hundred people, I think it is, renting out clothes throughout the whole of the UK. And they've got ambitions to expand. And they've got a really tight set of criteria in terms of environmental sustainability and fair work. So I'm not picking any particular candidate that'll be divisive, but let's give you a couple of examples of the businesses I've met recently that are doing grand jobs, but there's lots all over the place. And it's like a green business revolution taking place in Scotland just now, and it's great to see what's happening.
Yeah, no, that's true. And actually, you do tend, once you find one, you tend to find they know others round about them as well, and the network grows. So I think they're all fantastic candidates. And Sarah, that's a brilliant final question for us. So we've been here for 90 minutes talking about purpose. We've covered some really big topics: ESG, UN SDGs. We've talked about talent, leadership, value versus values. We've talked about how that looks internationally, how it looks locally as well. I've taken loads of notes, and we all recognise that actually so many businesses are at different places on the journey. And hopefully today, everyone that's joined has taken something away. I've certainly really appreciated being able to have that conversation and to think a bit more deeply about the issues. And I'd like to thank all of our panelists today, Martin, Miles, Emma, and the Minister as well, for all joining us. Thank you very much for that. And thank you to the Edinburgh Chamber of Commerce, who organised today's session as part of the Edinburgh Business Festival. And it's great to have access to networks to talk about these issues a bit more deeply. So thank you very much for your engagement, for the questions today. Thank you to the panelists for joining. And if you stuck for the full 90 minutes, well done. You probably need a rest, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks. Bye.